Do you think politicians in general, politicians, governments, well, how much power do you think they have to steer humanity towards good?
Um, I mean, there's a sort of age-old debate in history. Like, is history determined by these fundamental tides, or is it determined by the captain of the ship?
Mhm.
Out of
Hold
me,
on tight for
essentially.
this clip.
There's,
Elon Musk dropped some serious no BS advice. This is
but
not
I
one
mean,
to
there
miss.
are this is both really. I mean, there are tides, but it also matters who's captain of the ship. So it's a false dichotomy essentially. There's you I mean, there are certainly tides. The tides of history are there are real tides of history, and these tides are often technologically driven. If you say like the Gutenberg press, the widespread availability of books as a result of a printing press, that was a massive tide of history, independent of any ruler. But I think in stormy times, you want the best possible captain of the ship.
Well, first of all, thank you for recommending Will and Ariel Durant's work. I've read the short one for now.
Oh,
The
the
lessons
lessons
of
of history.
lessons of history.
Yeah.
And so one of the lessons, one of the things they highlight is the importance of technology,
Yeah.
technological innovation, and which is funny because they wrote so long ago, but they were noticing that the rate of technological innovation was speeding up.
Yeah,
I would
it
love
really
to
is.
to see what they think about now. But yeah, so to me, the question is how much government, how much politicians get in the way of technological innovation and building versus like help it, and which politicians, which kind of policies help technological innovation. Because that seems to be, if you look at human history, that's an important component of empires rising and succeeding.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in terms of dating civilization, the start of civilization, I think the start of writing, in my view, is that's my what I think is probably the right starting point to date civilization. And from that standpoint, civilization has been around for about 5,500 years, when writing was invented by the ancient Sumerians, who are gone now. But the ancient Sumerians, in terms of getting a lot of firsts, those ancient Sumerians really have a long list of firsts. It's pretty wild. In fact, Durant goes through the list. It's like, you want to see firsts? We'll show you firsts. The Sumerians were just ass kickers. And then the Egyptians, who were right next door, relatively speaking, weren't that far, developed an entirely different form of writing, the hieroglyphics. Cuneiform and hieroglyphics are totally different. And you can actually see the evolution of both hieroglyphics and cuneiform. Like the cuneiform starts off being very simple, and then it gets more complicated. And then towards the end, it's like, wow, okay, they really get very sophisticated with the cuneiform. So I think of civilization as being about 5,000 years old. And Earth is, if physics is correct, 4.5 billion years old. So civilization has been around for 1/1,000,000th of Earth's existence. Flash in the pan.
The comparison
there'll
between
be many
tides of
more.
history and the role
Yeah,
of leaders
exactly.
highlights
So,
how vital
I mean, only a
innovation
tiny
is
fraction,
as a
probably less than
driving
1%
force.
of
Technological
what was
leaps
ever
like the
written
printing press
in
show that
history
progress
is
often
available to us
transcends
now. I mean, if
politics.
they didn't put it literally
Yeah, these are the early days. And so
very early,
we make it very dramatic because there's been rises and falls of empires, and
so many rises and falls of empires, so many.
and there'll be many more.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, only a tiny fraction, probably less than 1% of what was ever written in history is available to us now. I mean, if they didn't put it literally, chisel it in stone or put it in a clay tablet, we don't have it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some small amount of like papyrus scrolls that were recovered that are thousands of years old, because they were deep inside a pyramid and weren't affected by moisture. But other than that, it's really got to be in a clay tablet or chiseled. So the vast majority of stuff was not chiseled, because it takes a while to chisel things. So that's why we've got tiny fraction of the information from history. But even that little information that we do have, and the archaeological record shows so many civilizations rising and falling. It's wild.
We tend to think that we're somehow different from those people. One of the other things that Durant highlights is that human nature seems to be the same. It just persists.
Yeah, I mean, the basics of human nature are more or less the same. You know?
So we get ourselves in trouble in the same kinds of ways, I think, even with the advanced technology.
Yeah, I mean, you do tend to see the same patterns, similar patterns, for civilizations where they go through a life cycle like an organism. Sort of just like a human is sort of a zygote, fetus, baby, toddler, teenager, eventually gets old and dies. The civilizations go through a life cycle. No civilization will last forever.
Isn't it humbling to realize how little of
perhaps
history we
to
truly
some a
know?
counterintuitive thing happens
With most records lost to
when
time,
civilizations
how can we be certain we're learning the right lessons to avoid repeating past
are
mistakes?
winning for too long.
What do you think it takes for the American empire to not collapse in the near-term future, in the next 100 years, to continue flourishing?
Well, the single biggest thing that is often actually not mentioned in history books, but Durant does mention it, is the birth rate. So, perhaps to some a counterintuitive thing happens when civilizations become are winning for too long. That the birth rate declines. It can often decline quite rapidly. We're seeing that throughout the world today. Currently, South Korea is I think maybe the lowest fertility rate, but there are many others that are close to it. It's like 0.8, I think. If the birth rate doesn't decline further, South Korea will lose roughly 60% of its population. But every year that birth rate is dropping. And this is true through most of the world. I don't mean to single out South Korea. It's been happening throughout the world. So as soon as any given civilization reaches a level of prosperity, the birth rate drops. And now you can go and look at the same thing happening in ancient Rome. So Julius Caesar took note of this, I think, around 50-ish BC, and tried to pass, I don't know if he was successful, tried to pass a law to give an incentive for any Roman citizen that would have a third child. And I think Augustus was able to, well, he was, the dictator, so the Senate was just for show. I think he did pass a tax incentive for Roman citizens to have a third child, but those efforts were unsuccessful. Rome fell because the Romans stopped making Romans. That's actually the fundamental issue. And there were other things. There was they had quite a series of malaria epidemics and plagues and whatnot. But they had those before. It's just that the birth rate was far lower than the death rate.
It really is that simple.
Well, I'm saying that's
more people.
That's
required
at a fundamental level. If a civilization does not at least maintain its numbers, it will disappear.
So perhaps the amount of compute that the biological computer allocates to.
Isn't it striking how prosperity often leads to its own undoing?
So that's like
declining
the
birth rates seem like a counterintuitive problem for successful civilizations.
I mean,
yet history shows this pattern repeating time and again.
No humanity.
If we know that low birth rates
rates
contributed to the fall of Rome, are we doing enough today to avoid a similar
giving
fate?
People the freedom to build
or
stuff?
Is modern society too focused
absolutely.
on short-term success to confront the deeper,
at
more
a basic
existential
level, if you do not
challenges?
at least maintain your number
to sex is justified. In fact, we should probably increase it.
Well, I mean, there's this hedonistic sex, which is, that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
It's
not productive.
It doesn't produce kids. Well, what matters. I mean, Durant makes this very clear because he's looked at one civilization after another, and they all went through the same cycle. When the civilization was under stress, the birth rate was high. But as soon as there were no external enemies, or they had a extended period of prosperity, the birth rate inevitably dropped every time. I don't believe there's a single exception.
So that's like the foundation of it. You need to have people.
Yeah. I mean, it's at a base level,
Yeah.
no humans, no humanity.
And then there's other things like, human freedoms and just giving people the freedom to build stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. But at a basic level, if you do not at least maintain your numbers, if you're below replacement rate and that trend continues, you will eventually disappear. This is elementary. Now, then, obviously, you also want to try to avoid like massive wars. If there's a global thermonuclear war, probably we're all toast. Radioactive toast. So we want to try to avoid those things. Then there are there's a thing that happens over time with any given civilization, which is that the laws and regulations accumulate, and if there's not some forcing function like a war to clean up the accumulation of laws and regulations, eventually everything becomes legal, and that's like the hardening of the arteries. Or a way to think of it is like being tied down by a million little strings, like Gulliver. You can't move. And it's not like any one of those strings is the issue. You got a million of them. So there has to be a sort of a garbage collection for laws and regulations, so that you don't keep accumulating laws and regulations to the point where you can't do anything. This is why we can't build high-speed rail in America. It's illegal. That's the issue. It's illegal 6 ways to Sunday to build high-speed rail in America.
I wish you could.
History paints a sobering picture of civilizations that flourished for centuries, only to collapse because of internal decline. Prosperity, as strange as it seems, often creates conditions where birth rates plummet, weakening the society's ability to sustain itself. While modern technology offers incredible advancements, it's clear that without addressing this fundamental issue, even the most advanced civilizations are not immune to the same fate as ancient Rome.
Just like for a week, go into Washington and like be the head of the committee for making, for the garbage collection, making government smaller, like removing stuff.
I have discussed with Trump the idea of a government efficiency commission.
Nice. Yeah.
And I would be willing to be part of that commission.
I wonder how hard that is.
The antibody reaction would be very strong.
Yes. Yeah.
So you really have to. You're attacking the Matrix at that point. The Matrix will fight back.
This conversation paints a sobering yet fascinating picture of civilization's fragility and the patterns we seem doomed to repeat. From the rise and fall of empires to the unintended consequences of prolonged prosperity, the historical parallels are both striking and unnerving.
If there's not some forcing
it's clear
function
that
like
the challenges facing modern society, declining birth rates, overregulation, and the threat of stagnation aren't new, but our ability to address them seems increasingly limited. The decline in birth rates, for example,
way to think of it is
isn't
like
just a demographic
tied down by
it's a symptom of how prosperity
like
can alter fundamental human behavior.
That's not like any one of those strings.
The idea that civilizations fail not because of external forces, but because they stop making Romans hits hard. It suggests that the comforts we strive for might inherently undermine our long-term survival.
So that
Similarly, the metaphor of being tied down by a million strings perfectly encapsulates the paralyzing effect of excessive laws and regulations.
It's illegal. That's the issue.
High-speed rail in the U.S. isn't just a transportation issue. It's a case study in how societies can suffocate under the weight of their own rules. I wish you could just like for a week go into
without
Washington a deliberate
and
effort
like
to clear
be
out
the head
these
of the committee
constraints,
for making
progress becomes almost impossible.
What is it?